Module 3 Inter-process communication. So this module is dealing with different ways of communicating between different processes in a distributed system, and that is called inter-process communication. So these are the main topics: characteristics of inter-process communication, then group communication, multicast communication, remote procedure call, network virtualization, and as a case study we have Skype. So in the process communication primitives mainly is support point-to-point communication, right? The two different processes at the two endpoints are communicated using some inter-process communication mechanism. But in case of distributed system, it is equally useful to be able to send a message from one sender to a group of receivers, and that is called group communication. And multicast is another method of communicating to a group, and IP multicast we have to support this multicast communication. And even if the IP multicast is not available, the distributed applications are supposed to support with multicast facility, and for this we are using a network virtualization facility. We are using some overlay network to support this virtualization. And in case of communication, how remote objects are actually referred, or some high level communication service are discussed, that is called remote procedure call. Now coming to the characteristics of different protocols for communication between different processes are discussed. Usually two different primitives are used for communication. Those are send and receive. Those will be discussed in detail. And coming to internet, TCP and UDP are the protocols which support this process to process communication. Those are discussed together with the supporting concepts like sockets, datagrams, etc. will be discussed. Now if we analyze this middleware, this communication protocols or different inter-process communication mechanism comes in the lower layer of this middleware layer. So the methods like remote method invocation, remote procedure calls are coming under the upper layer. So we are dealing with this lower layer of middleware layer for inter-process communication. Those works above the UDP and TCP protocols provided by the TCP/IP suite. Now if we look into UDP, the API to UDP provides a message passing abstraction. We can say that message passing is the simplest form of inter-process communication. So this API enables a sending process to transmit a single message to a receiving process. And these messages will be formed as a set of independent packets. And these packets are called datagrams. In case of Java and Unix API, the sender specifies the destination using a socket address. So socket is actually indirect reference to a particular port used by a destination process at a destination computer. So if we look into TCP, the API to TCP provides the abstraction of a two-way stream between pairs of processes. So the information communicated in this case will be a stream of data items where no message boundaries are specified. It will be just treated as a flow of data, stream of data in case of TCP. So once a connection is established, any number of data or any number of messages can be transmitted over this communication channel. So inter-process communication can be either synchronous or asynchronous. Whatever may be the type of communication, there will be a queue associated with each destination. So sending process causes messages to be added to this remote queue, and receiving process remove message from this local queue. In the synchronous form of communication, the sending and receiving processes synchronize at every message. That is, both send and receive are blocking operations here. Blocking in the sense, whenever a send is issued, the sending process or the sending thread is blocked until the corresponding receive is issued by the receiver process. Like that, whenever a receive is issued by a process or thread, it blocks until a message is arrived. Whereas in the case of asynchronous communication, the use of send operation is always non-blocking. That means sending process is allowed to proceed as soon as the message has been copied to a local buffer, and the transmission of the message proceeds in parallel with the sending process. That is, sending process can do some other work while the transmission of that message is in progress. Whereas the receive operation here can have either blocking or non-blocking variant. So in the non-blocking variant, the receiving process proceeds with its program after issuing a receive operation. And this will provide a buffer to be filled in the background, but it must separately receive notification that its buffer has been filled by polling or interrupt method. In some systems which supports multiple threads in a single process, it can have blocking variant for asynchronous communication. Receiver side can be blocking variant. So blocking receive has no disadvantage if there are multiple threads where a special thread is reserved for this communication. So it can be issued by one thread while other threads in process remain active. And the simplicity of synchronizing the receiving threads with the incoming message is a substantial advantage. Non-blocking communication is actually more efficient compared to the blocking variant, but involves extra complexity in the receiving process because it need to acquire the incoming messages out of its flow of control. So for this reason, today's system don't generally provide the non-blocking form of receive. Instead, it use the blocking form of receive, provided multiple threads are there and one specific thread is dedicated for this communication. Now, how the message destinations are actually specified. If we are using this internet protocol, messages are usually sent to a pair. That is, an internet address will be there together with a local port. These two in combination will decide the destination. Actually, this local port is a message destination within a computer and it is specified as an integer. So each port in a destination machine has exactly one receiver but can have many senders. Like that, the same machine can have multiple ports to receive multiple messages. So servers and all will publish their port numbers so that client can access it using their port numbers. And if the client uses a fixed internet address to refer to a service, then the problem is that the service must always run on the same computer for its address to remain valid, right? So this can be avoided, that is, location of the service can be made flexible using name service and all. In that case, the client can refer a service using the name instead of the IP address. Another characteristics of inter-process communication is the communication should be reliable. So reliable communication can be defined in terms of two different factors, validity and integrity. So coming to validity property, a point-to-point message service is described as reliable if messages are guaranteed to be delivered even when a number of attempts are there, that is, number of packets being dropped or lost, still it is guaranteed to be delivered. Whereas the integrity property requires that the message must arrive uncorrupted and without duplication. These are the two different properties to say that a particular communication is reliable. Ordering is another characteristics feature of inter-process communication. So some applications require that messages be delivered in sender order. Sender order in the sense the order in which they were transmitted by the sender. So delivery of messages out of order is regarded as a failure in such applications. Now coming to sockets. So IPC mechanism in internet provides sockets for communication. Actually the socket originates from BSD Unix. Anyway, it is present in most of the operating system like Solaris, Linux, etc. So in all the above OSs, these processes can send and receive messages via socket. And socket is actually software abstractions created by the process. And to send and receive messages, these sockets should be bound to a port number and an IP address in order to send and receive messages. And this socket will be associated with a transport protocol like UDP or TCP. And message sent to some of the IP address and port number. This combination, that is internet address together with port number, specify a particular process, and that can be received only by a process whose socket is bound to that address and port number. So obviously this port cannot be shared by different processes. So each computer has a large number of possible port numbers for use by local processors. Any process may make use of multiple ports to receive messages, but a process cannot share ports with other processes on the same computer. Any number of processes may send messages to the same port. Each socket will be associated with a particular protocol. So here you can see in the figure that the server is having a socket into which a port number is assigned, and the client having another socket which is bound to another port and passing message to the server port. Now the UDP datagram communication. As you know, UDP datagram, there is no acknowledgement or retries, right? And there is no guarantee of order preservation, and also there can be message loss and duplications of messages. Anyway, the main advantage of UDP is it's very fast. That's the main thing. And coming to different steps for communication in UDP, first create a socket by the sender, then bind the socket to a port and a local IP address of that machine. So after that it can send messages. Usually a client binds to any free local port of that machine. But in the case of server, it should be bound to a particular or fixed port, because that port number should be published to the client. So always a particular service will be bound to a fixed port number. And the receive method in UDP returns the IP address, port number, and the message received. These three things will be returned by the receive method. Now coming to different issues in datagram communication with UDP. First one is message size. As we know, the messages are actually transmitted by the lower layer protocols like IP, which is coming in the network layer or internet layer, right? And this IP allows for messages of up to 216 bytes only, but our application, the message size may not fit into this size. In that case, the messages may have to be fragmented, and each fragment will be treated as a datagram with its own header and trailer. That is the first issue. So they may be arrived at the destination out of order. And also to receive a message at the destination, it should first declare or reserve an array of bytes. And if arriving message is too big for the array allocated to receive the message, truncation also may be occur. In this case, the message, some part of the message may be lost. Next issue is blocking. Usually the send operation in UDP is non-blocking, and the receive operation is blocking. So in case of send operation, that operation can return as soon as it has handed over the message to underlying UDP and IP. So these are the protocols responsible for the actual transmission of data. And at the destination upon arrival, the message is placed in a queue for the socket that is bound to that destination port to which actually this message is addressed. And this message can be collected by an outstanding or future invocation of receive method. And the problem here is that the messages are discarded at the destination if no process has already a socket bound to this destination port. The receive method, which is blocking in nature. So the method receive blocks until a datagram is received. We can set some timeout in this case. In that case, the receive method will wait until a timeout occurs. So if the process that invokes the receive method has other work to do while waiting for the message, it should arrange to use a separate thread for this message reception. Just for example, in the case of server, the server receives a message from a client. The message may specify work to do, in which case the server will use a separate thread to do the work and to wait for messages from other clients. Now another issue is it is not appropriate in most of the cases to wait indefinitely by a receive method, because there can be some situations like the sending process may be crashed. In that case, some timeout can be set for exiting this indefinite wait. Another issue is receive from any. So in the case of receive method, it does not specify an origin for messages. That is, it is ready to receive message from any source. So an invocation of receive gets a message addressed to its socket from any origin. So the receive method returns the internet address and local port of the sender, allowing the recipient to check where the message came from. It is possible to connect a datagram socket to a particular remote port and internet. That is another case, in which case the socket is only able to send messages to and receive messages from that fixed address. Now coming to the failure model of UDP datagrams. So we know the failure model of a communication channel defines reliable communication, and the reliability of a channel can be described in terms of two different properties, that are integrity and validity, right? The integrity property requires that message should not be corrupted or duplicated. Like methods like checksum can be used here to ensure that the message is not corrupted. And the UDP datagrams suffer from the following two failures. One is omission failure and the second one ordering. Now the omission failure. In case of UDP, messages may be dropped occasionally either because of a checksum error or because no buffer space is available at the source or destination. So there can be send omission, receive omission failure, or there can be omission failures in the communication channel. Ordering. In the case of UDP, there is no guarantee that the messages are delivered in order. There can be out of order delivery. That is another failure. Now coming to the second alternative, that is TCP stream communication. So in case of TCP, API to the TCP protocols provides the abstraction of a stream of bytes instead of separate packets. So there won't be any boundary between different packets. Instead, the data will be flowed as a stream of bytes. Now we can see different characteristics of this TCP stream communication. First one is message sizes. So in case of TCP, application is usually choosing any type of message, any size of message, right? But the TCP decides how much to collect before transmitting. Usually it will segment the data. And how the lost messages are handled. So in case of TCP, there is acknowledgement for each and every message. So it can easily find out which are the lost messages, and that will be resent. And flow control, there is mechanism in TCP to maintain a speed match between the sender and receiver. So the buffer in the receiver or sender never overwhelmed used by the speed mismatch. And the message destinations, no need of specifying IP address and port number because we are using a dedicated connection or dedicated path for communication. So once the connection is established, any number of data can be transmitted without specifying the destination address. Now let us see some outstanding issues in TCP stream communication. First one is matching of data items. So two communicating processes need to agree as to the contents of the data transmitted over a stream. Just for example, if one process writes an int followed by a double to a stream, then the reader at the other end must read an integer followed by a double. So when a pair of processes do not cooperate correctly in their use of stream, the reading process may experience errors when interpreting the data, right? Or may block due to insufficient data in the stream. And second issue is blocking. So blocking may happen in both sender and receiver. As we have seen, the data returned to a stream is kept in a queue at the destination socket, right? So when the process at the receiver side attempts to read data from this channel, it will get the data from the queue, or it have to block until the data becomes available. So this is how the blocking happens at the receiver side. Like that, sender also can be blocked. The process that writes data to a stream may be blocked, but the sender may be blocked by the TCP flow control mechanism if the socket at the other end is queuing as much as the protocol allows. So that queue is full. In that case, the sender also have to be blocked. Now another issue is threads. So when a server accepts a connection, it generally creates a new thread for that communication, right? So corresponding to each client, there will be a separate thread by the server. So the advantage of using a separate thread for each client is that server can block when waiting for input without delaying other clients. But that's a normal case. But there can be some situations that the environment does not support multiple threads or thread mechanism. In that case, the alternative is to test whether the input is available from a stream before attempting to read it. And this will affect the performance of the system. Now the failure model for TCP. So to ensure a reliable communication, two different properties have to be assured, that is integrity property and validity property. So to satisfy this integrity property, the TCP used checksum to detect and reject corrupt packets, and sequence numbers are used to detect and reject duplicates. And to ensure this validity property, TCP streams use timeouts and retransmission to deal with lost packets. So therefore messages are guaranteed to be delivered even when some of the underlying packets are lost. Now we have to check some situations like suppose a packet loss over a connection passes or crosses a time limit because of high network congestion. In that case, the sender won't receive any acknowledgement for a long time and it will declare the connection as broken. Thus, we have to say that TCP does not provide reliable communication because it is not guaranteed to deliver messages in the face of all possible difficulties. Thank you.